The grocery store was never a place I thought I'd experience fear. It was just a quiet, familiar building on the corner of my neighborhood. I'd been there 100 times. Rows of canned goods, freezer aisles humming faintly, the distant sound of a cash register beeping away purchases. But that night, something felt off. I should have trusted my instincts and left. I had stopped by after work. It was late, later than usual, and the store was mostly empty. A few tired shoppers drifted through the aisles, faces blank, minds elsewhere. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly above me, casting a dull, artificial glow over the shelves. I only needed a few things: milk, bread, maybe a snack. But as I wandered toward the canned goods aisle, I felt it. A chill. Subtle, like a draft that shouldn't be there. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I brushed the feeling aside. I was just tired. My feet dragged slightly against the scuffed tile floor as I pushed my cart forward. But then, I saw it. Tucked between rows of canned green beans and corn sat a doll. It didn't belong there. It wasn't packaged. It wasn't bright or colorful like a child's toy. It was old, worn fabric, yellowed with age, stitched crudely together. Its black button eyes reflected the light, empty and cold. Its mouth, a single crooked stitch, curved upward in a lopsided, eerie smile. Why would a doll be here? I leaned closer, my curiosity getting the better of me. My heart thudded harder in my chest the longer I stared. It looked handmade, rough seams, jagged stitches. It didn't fit in a clean corporate grocery store. I should have walked away, but instead I reached out. The second my fingers brushed the doll's fabric, the air shifted. Everything around me felt heavier, colder. The lights overhead flickered just once. Quickly. So quickly that I might have imagined it. But I didn't. A wave of nausea rolled through me as I lifted the doll from the shelf. It felt heavier than it should have, and warm. Warmer than fabric left sitting on a cold shelf had any right to be. I shook off the feeling and placed the doll back where I found it. Whatever it wasn't my problem. I turned to leave the aisle, but the store was different. The shelves seemed taller, stretching impossibly high toward the ceiling. The aisles, once neat and organized, now twisted in strange angles, bending into each other. My stomach clenched as I realized I couldn't see the front of the store anymore. Something was wrong. I walked faster, pushing my cart, trying to shake off the growing unease. But the sound of the wheels seemed too loud. Each squeak echoed unnervingly through the empty aisles. And then I heard it. A whisper. At first it was faint, too quiet to understand. But it grew louder, more distinct. It was my name. I froze. My pulse thundered in my ears. No one else was around. The store was too quiet, too still. I spun around, expecting to see someone. Nothing. The doll wasn't on the shelf anymore. A wave of cold panic surged through me. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was just tired and stressed. But the feeling wouldn't leave. I needed to get out. Now I left my cart behind and started walking. Faster, then breaking into a jog. But no matter which way I turned, the aisles stretched endlessly ahead, looping back in ways that didn't make sense. And that whisper, my name, it hadn't stopped. It was closer now, clearer. A burst of static rang in my ears, loud and sudden, making me stagger. I clutched my head. When the noise faded, I heard something else. Laughter, software high-pitched, childlike, but wrong. I broke into a sprint, my breath coming in sharp gasps. My heart pounded against my ribs. I didn't know where I was running. I just knew I had to move. I rounded a corner and slammed into a shelf, knocking over a row of cereal boxes. Pain shot up my arm, but I kept going. I couldn't stop, not now. And then I saw it, the doll. It sat in the middle of the aisle, waiting, Its black button eyes seemed to glow in the flickering light. That stitched smile, wider now, twisted, mocking. I tried to move past it, but my legs wouldn't work. My whole body felt heavy, like invisible hands were gripping me, holding me in place. The lights flickered again and went out completely. I stood there in the dark, panting, heart racing, the laughter swirling around me. Cold fingers seemed to brush against my neck. My vision blurred. I felt myself falling into nothing. When I woke up, I wasn't in the grocery store. I was in a hospital bed. Bright lights stung my eyes as I blinked against the haze clouding my mind. My throat was dry, and every muscle in my body ached. What had happened? A voice pulled me from my thoughts. "You're awake." I turned my head. The grocery store owner stood beside my bed, arms crossed, a worried expression on his face. "One of my employees found you passed out," he said. "Are you okay?" I struggled to sit up. My heart was still pounding. My mouth felt like sandpaper. "The doll," I whispered. I found a doll. Something happened." His expression shifted to confusion. "Doll?" he repeated. "We don't sell dolls." "No, I touched it," I said, my voice growing more desperate. "It was on the shelf. Something was wrong with it." He shook his head. "We don't carry dolls like that. There's no record of any toy in the canned goods aisle." I wanted to argue, to make him believe me, but I couldn't find the words. A chill ran down my spine. I turned my gaze toward the corner of the hospital room, and my heart nearly stopped. The doll was sitting there. Same black button eyes, same crooked smile. I discharged myself and went back to my apartment. But from that day till now, I sometimes hear those voices and whispers, and it isn't easy to ignore them. It started on a night like any other. I wasn't even supposed to be at the grocery store that late, but I had run out of coffee. It was the only thing keeping me sane during long nights of work. So, despite how exhausted I felt, I grabbed my keys and headed out. The store was mostly empty when I arrived. Just a couple of other shoppers quietly browsing, their faces pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. I always hated how quiet it got late at night, like the whole place had fallen into some weird, lifeless trance. I grabbed a basket and made my way through the aisles, checking my mental list. Coffee, bread, something quick for dinner. My footsteps echoed faintly as I walked, the cold tile beneath my shoes sending a strange chill up my spine. Everything seemed normal. At first, I should have left when I had the chance. I was in the back aisle when I noticed something strange. The shelf against the wall, a towering metal unit filled with bags of rice and pasta, was slightly off-center. It looked wrong, like it had been moved recently. Curiosity tugged at me. I stepped closer. There was a thin gap between the shelf and the wall, just wide enough to see that something was hidden behind it. Without really thinking, I pushed my basket aside and leaned in. A door. A narrow gray door. It was old, with chipped paint and a rusty handle. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the cold metal. Why was there a door behind a shelf? I'd been coming to this store for years and had never noticed it before. I should have walked away, but something about that door pulled at me. I grabbed the handle and turned it. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a dark, narrow staircase leading down. A musty, damp smell drifted up from below, making my stomach twist. Why would a grocery store have a basement? I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness as I carefully stepped inside. The air grew colder with every step I took. My breathing felt loud, too loud, in the silence. I reached the bottom of the stairs and froze. It wasn't a storage room. It was something else. A wide, circular room stretched out before me. The walls were made of stone, old and crumbling, as if this place had existed long before the store was ever built. Candles flickered along the edges, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. In the center of the room stood a large table, and around it, people. They were dressed in dark robes, silent, still, their faces hidden by deep hoods. I tried to back away, but my feet wouldn't move. A heavy coppery smell filled the air. At first I thought it was rust, but it wasn't. It was something far worse. Blood. My stomach lurched. The people around the table were chanting, low, rhythmic whispers that echoed through the room. The words were foreign, ancient, wrong. I couldn't understand them, but something deep inside me knew this wasn't supposed to be happening. I needed to get out. Now I took a shaky step back, but my foot scraped against a loose stone. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the silence. The chanting stopped. Every hooded head turned toward me at once. My heart slammed against my ribs. I spun around and bolted back toward the stairs, barely able to breathe. My legs felt heavy, like the air itself was trying to hold me back. I hit the door and shoved it open, heart pounding in my ears. The fluorescent lights of the grocery store felt blinding after the darkness below. I slammed the door shut behind me, leaning against it while I tried to catch my breath. What had I just seen? I needed to call someone, the police, anyone. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone. My fingers shook so badly that I almost dropped it. I dialed 911 and forced myself to speak clearly. There's something happening, I gasped. At the grocery store, there's a hidden room. There are people doing something weird. It's not normal. The dispatcher's voice was calm and steady, but I couldn't focus on her words. I gave her the address and hung up, my breath coming in ragged bursts. The store was quiet again. Too quiet. I turned around and nearly jumped out of my skin. The store owner was standing behind me. His face was calm. Too calm. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his voice smooth and polite, but his eyes were sharp. Too sharp. I found a door," I stammered. "Down there, in the back. There are people doing some kind of ritual." His face didn't change, not a flicker of surprise. "A door," he repeated, raising an eyebrow. "We don't have a basement." I froze. "No, I saw it," I insisted. "Behind the shelf. I went down there." He shook his head, a polite smile curling at his lips. "You must be mistaken," he said quietly. "There's nothing down there, just storage." I didn't believe him. The way he looked at me, calm, collected, made my skin crawl. But before I could say anything else, the police arrived. I led them straight to the back aisle. But the door was gone. The shelf stood perfectly in place. No gap, no hidden door. I stared in disbelief, my mouth dry. "It was here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I swear, I saw it." One of the officers gave me a concerned look. "Are you sure?" he asked. "This doesn't seem like the kind of place for whatever you're describing." I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream. But what could I say? The door was gone. The room was gone. The smell of blood. Gone. And the store owner? He just stood there, smiling faintly. "Maybe you were just tired," he suggested gently. "These late hours can play tricks on you." I didn't believe him, but I also couldn't prove anything. The police left, and I didn't buy my coffee. I didn't buy anything. I just walked out of the store and didn't look back. For days afterward, I tried to tell myself it wasn't real, that I had imagined it. But deep down, I knew the truth. There was something beneath that store, something dark, and they didn't want me to find it again. But the worst part, when I went back a week later, just to check, the store was closed. permanently. No signs, no explanation, as if it had never existed.
I wasn't planning to stop at the grocery store that night. It was already late, too late to be out, but I was hungry, and my fridge was almost empty. I had driven past the store 100 times, but something about it always seemed off. It wasn't one of those bright, modern grocery chains. It was old, tucked between a closed-down laundromat and a dusty antique shop no one ever visited. The sign above the door flickered weakly, as if the electricity could cut out any second. Most nights, I would have kept driving, but I was too tired, too hungry, and I told myself I was being silly. It was just a grocery store. What could possibly go wrong? When I stepped inside, the smell hit me first. It wasn't rotten, just, strange. Like metal and bleach mixed with something else I couldn't quite place. I shook it off, convincing myself it was just old pipes or cleaning supplies. The faint hum of the overhead lights filled the silence, and the air felt unnervingly still. The store was almost empty, except for the cashier. A heavy-set man sat behind the counter, barely glancing up as I walked in. His greasy black hair clung to his forehead, and the collar of his shirt was stained with something dark. His eyes followed me without a word as I grabbed a basket and started walking through the aisles. I tried to ignore the way his gaze lingered. The store itself was weird, too. The shelves were tall, casting long, twisted shadows. Some of the products looked fine, but others didn't. Dust-covered jars, boxes of cereal with faded labels. I even saw a can without a label at all, just a rusty, dented cylinder. I kept walking, hoping to grab what I needed and leave. But as I turned down another aisle, something caught my eye. At the very back of the store, past the refrigerators and a wall of mismatched cleaning supplies, there was a door. It was small and unmarked, with chipped green paint. It looked wrong, out of place. I shouldn't have cared, but for some reason, I did. I glanced back at the cashier. He was still watching me, his mouth twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. I knew I should leave it alone, but my curiosity got the better of me. The door wasn't locked. It opened with a low, groaning creak, revealing a narrow staircase leading downward. A cold draft blew up from below, carrying a smell that was far stronger than anything else in the store. Metal, bleach, and something else, something dead. I knew better than to go down there, but against all logic, I stepped inside. The stairs were steep and uneven, each step creaking under my weight. The air grew colder with every step I took. My heart thudded in my chest, but I kept going. At the bottom, I found myself in a long, dimly lit hallway. The walls were concrete, cracked and stained in ways I didn't want to think about. A row of flickering fluorescent lights hung above me, buzzing faintly. I should have turned back, but something in the air felt wrong, like I wasn't supposed to be there, and that made me want to keep going. I moved slowly, stepping over scattered boxes and broken pallets. The hallway twisted, leading me deeper beneath the store. My breath felt too loud in the silence. And then I heard something, a soft rhythmic sound, like shuffling footsteps. I froze, my skin crawled, and I turned to leave. But when I did, I realized the stairwell behind me was gone, just a solid concrete wall where the door had been. Panic crawled up my throat, but I forced myself to keep calm. There had to be another exit. There had to be. I kept walking. The sound grew louder with each step, closer. My fingers tightened around my phone and I turned on the flashlight. The dim beam cut through the darkness, revealing rusted pipes overhead and stains smeared across the floor. Then I saw the door. It was larger than the first one, steel, with a thick bolt holding it shut. The stench was stronger here, curling around me like something alive. My stomach twisted violently, and for a second, I thought I might be sick. I didn't want to open that door, but I did. It groaned as it swung open, revealing a room that shouldn't exist. Bodies. Rows of bodies in white suits lying on metal tables. The suits were stained, some with blood, some with black streaks that reeked of something chemical. Their faces were hidden beneath white hoods. At first, I thought they were mannequins, until I saw one of them twitch. I stumbled backward, my mind scrambling to process what I was seeing. The air was heavy, thick with decay. And then I saw him, one of the bodies. His hood had slipped, revealing a pale, familiar face. It was my old school friend, someone who had died years ago in a car accident. I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred, but it was him. His face was as clear as day, except he was supposed to be dead. I took another step back and slammed into something, someone. I spun around and found myself face to face with the man from the front counter. But up close, he looked worse. His skin was slick with sweat, his face too pale, and thick black hair sprouted from his neck and arms in coarse patches. He didn't speak. He just smiled, a wide, toothy grin that sent ice down my spine. And then he grabbed me. His grip was like iron, crushing my wrist as I struggled against him. I twisted, kicked, anything to break free. My heart pounded as he dragged me toward one of the tables. I couldn't let this happen. My hand fumbled against a metal tray nearby. Without thinking, I grabbed the first thing I could, a rusted metal wrench, and swung it. It connected with a sickening crack against his arm. He howled, releasing me for just a second, but it was enough. I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding in my throat, and sprinted toward the hall. Somehow, the door at the far end was open again. I didn't question it. I just ran. I flew up the stairs, back into the empty grocery store. I didn't stop, not even when the heavy door slammed shut behind me. I burst outside, gulping fresh air, my hands shaking as I grabbed my phone and dialed the police. My voice trembled as I tried to explain about the basement, the bodies, the man. They arrived quickly, but when they searched the store, the door was gone. The basement didn't exist. And the store owner? He was nowhere to be found. The police didn't believe me. No one did. But I know what I saw, and sometimes when I'm driving late at night, I swear I see that flickering sign again. But I never stop. Not anymore.